Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be going over some severe storms which are going to be impacting the central United States. We already have a slight risk out on day 3, and on day 4 we have a 15% chance of severe weather in parts of the central plains. So we already have some early risks of severe weather. We have that warmer air to the east, some chillier air to the north and to the west, and all of that combining together is what's going to be allowing these storms to really develop. So we're going to be timing this out for you guys and giving you some details on what you need to know about this severe weather outbreak that could potentially be in the making. So here's what the current National Weather Service page looks like. As you can see, we have a couple winter weather advisories in parts of Montana, as well as some wind advisories in North Dakota, Montana, and Idaho. We have some red flag warnings in southern Utah, and then I believe those are just a few air quality alerts scattered throughout parts of the southeast and the southwest as well. We have coastal flood advisories and flood watches in effect for parts of Louisiana and Texas as well. And looking at the extremes yesterday, we had a high temperature in Rio Grande Village, Texas yesterday, where they got up to 103 degrees Fahrenheit. The low temperature was 14 miles north of Flagstaff, Arizona, where they got down to 11 degrees Fahrenheit. The highest rainfall or precipitation report was in Trinidad, Colorado, where they got 3.48 inches of reported precipitation. And the highest snowfall report was 5 miles southeast of Grant, Montana, where they got up to 8 inches of reported snowfall yesterday. So here's what the Storm Prediction Center page looks like on day 3, which would be for Wednesday, and this is going to be carrying over into Thursday and maybe some parts of early on Friday. So you can see that big area of slight risk, which covers parts of South Dakota, Wyoming, pretty much the entire state of Nebraska, and a little bit more of Iowa, Missouri, and Kansas. So that's a quite large area for the day 3 outlook to have a slight risk on. So that, again, that is for Wednesday. If we look at the day 4 outlook, you have a 15% chance equivalent to a slight risk in parts of Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. This is also another large area of slight risk. So two fairly decent sized chunks of the country under a slight risk between Wednesday and Thursday, and I wouldn't be surprised if for Friday we maybe have a marginal risk or a small slight risk that is even added onto some of these regions, because it does look like this is going to be one of the bigger events that we're going to see over the next couple of weeks. So looking at the RGEM model, this is the regional Canadian model, and we're going to be timing this out for you guys over 3-hour increments and just taking you through the next couple of days and showing you what you should be expecting. So we already have a little bit of chillier air into the northern part of the country, so into parts of North Dakota, Minnesota, Montana. We have a bit of chillier air into there, but we do have some warmer air as you get further to the south. So right in between those two areas of cold and warm is where we're going to see that clash in the form of severe storms. So we're starting to see a little bit of that moisture funnel up into parts of South Dakota, Nebraska, and Wyoming by late Wednesday night. So we're talking about probably around 7 or 8 o'clock, and then moving on to about 9 or 10 o'clock Central Time. You can see that we have those storms into South Dakota, Nebraska, even making its way down into Kansas and Oklahoma. But these aren't too severe by this point. So this would be by 7 o'clock. Here would be by around 10 o'clock, and we're dealing with at night on Wednesday, and you can see we're dealing with some storms still into the Dakotas and Nebraska, but again, these aren't too widespread by this point. If we move on a little bit more, this is by 1 a.m. on Thursday morning Central Time, and we're dealing with these storms starting to ramp up a little bit as they're heading into South Dakota and eastern Nebraska. So this is when they might start to actually get a little bit more intense, and one of the reasons that is because we have a very amplified pattern. So in the southern United States and in the central United States, we have those warmer than normal temperatures. Again, that's amplifying the pattern. That's making a bigger temperature difference. And the bigger the temperature difference, the higher those cloud tops are going to rise to try and reach equilibrium. And that's how you get a fairly severe storm. So you really, if you want severe weather, you would want to see cold air in the north and warm air in the south to create a bigger temperature difference in between. and that's how most severe weather events start out. So the bigger that temperature difference, the colder it is to the north, the warmer it is to the south, is generally a good way to measure how severe these storms might actually end up being. And of course, there are other elements to this. So there's the dew points we want to look at, the actual high temperatures, the Cape values. So all of that is what we're going to be taking into account. But the first major thing is going to be that temperature differential. Here to be by around 4 in the morning on Thursday morning, and you can see that we have a low pressure down in Kansas. It is broadening out, so we have another center that's trying to develop right in here. So two areas that are semi-developed in parts of Kansas and Nebraska. You can see a fairly large area on the regional Canadian. Now this model does tend to over-exaggerate how large these storms are, just because it is a lower resolution model, but we have to use it because it goes out far enough. This is the only mesoscale model that actually goes out far enough, but it does tend to overestimate how wide and large these types of storms are. Expect something like this, but maybe 2 to 3 times smaller with the same intensity. So it's not going to be over this huge area in eastern Nebraska necessarily. It'll probably be over a smaller chunk of the state, but still probably with some similar rainfall rates, and also similar impacts in terms of winds and hail and tornadoes and all of that as well. So this would be by around 7 in the morning, and you can see it is actually starting to develop quite nicely. So that second low pressure to the north is winning out. So this one that was in Nebraska is starting to do a lot better than the one down in Kansas. And you can see we even start to get a little bit of a hook echo starting to develop. So this is going to start to break off, and it's going to branch out and become a little bit wider over the next couple of hours. So this would be by 7 in the morning on Thursday, and then here would be by 10 in the morning. And you can see that we're dealing with this moving south and eastward. If we move this on a little bit more, you're going to see that by 1 p.m., we're starting to deal with a fairly robust and wide area of storms into parts of Iowa, Illinois, and Missouri as well. And again, it's probably not going to be this wide in terms of how the width of the storm. I probably will be 2 to 3 times smaller than this, just like I just said. But we probably will still see similar impacts in terms of the amount of rain and also the winds that are expected with this event. If you go on a little bit more, you're going to see that going into the evening hours, we're starting to see these storms break off a little bit. So they're becoming a little bit more convective in nature and a little bit more scattered and disjointed, I would say. And then if we go to the last frame of this model, you can see it's really starting to get a good severe weather outbreak type of look, where you're starting to get these more jagged lines here that are indicating they have individual supercells. So I think probably what's going to happen is that we're going to have more of a hail wind threat into parts of Nebraska, Iowa, into Wyoming, South Dakota, those areas, and also maybe into northern Kansas. And then you get into southern Kansas, southern Missouri, Oklahoma, areas like southern Illinois and parts of Kentucky and Indiana. That's where we would be dealing with maybe more of a weak tornado threat and more of a wind threat as well. So once those storms start to actually break off a little bit, it gives it a little bit more space to actually generate a couple tornadoes. So we're going to have to watch out for this, and we're going to continue to give you updates over the next couple of days. And then if we look at the GFS, just to finish this off, you can see that they would last maybe another couple hours, and then eventually they would break off. Here's the total amount of rainfall that is expected over the next 4 days, and you can see that we're expecting over an inch over this entire region that was impacted by these storms. And even a few areas that are getting maybe 2 to 3 inches or even 4 inches in a few areas, but generally looks to be a scattered 1 to 2 inches. Again, a couple areas could get over that 3-inch mark, and that would be in isolated regions. Here would be the high temperatures, and you can see for Wednesday, we have highs that are going to be above 70 over this entire region, so definitely above 70 degrees. Even up near 75 or 80 in parts of southern Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, parts of southern Iowa as well. So you get further south and east, and of course you're going to start to warm up a little bit more. But here's that temperature differential. You're going from the 70s in southern South Dakota and then into the 50s in southern North Dakota. So you're going over maybe 100, 150 miles, and you have a huge temperature differential, maybe 20 degrees there. So that is going to be one of the factors that is going to help these storms start off and actually start to wreak havoc over parts of the central plains. So again, that temperature differential I think is something that not a lot of people are picking up on, but I think it is one of the reasons that this event is actually happening. And if you look at for Thursday, even more drastic. So you're dealing with some parts of northern South Dakota having a high temperature in the mid 40s. That's really, really cold for May. And then you go down further to the south and we have high temperatures in the 80s. So over maybe a few hundred miles, that's a 30 plus degree temperature difference. So that is quite extreme. And even over some smaller locations, we have bigger temperature differentials. So that is definitely something that you want to pay attention to. If we look at for the dew points, we also have some rather decent dew points. They're above 60 in most of these areas further to the south for Thursday early in the morning. So that is a good sign if you like severe weather. Not a good sign if you don't like severe weather. Here would be by Thursday night into Friday morning, and you can see the dew points actually rise in parts of Kansas, Missouri, southern Iowa, the southern half of Illinois, and of course areas further south and east of there as well. If we look at the Cape values, these are also going to be quite high, or quite high for this region. So if this were in the southern plains, I actually wouldn't think this would be too big of an outbreak necessarily. But the fact that this is happening in the northern plains, where typically we don't get too much severe weather at this point in the spring and summer season, that's why I think it'll be a little bit more substantial. So you can see that by Wednesday in the early afternoon, we're starting to heat up with a few areas reaching above 500 Cape, which is generally the threshold I like to use. And you can see that entire region has good enough cape to sustain a storm. And then if we look at for Thursday in the early afternoon, you can tell where that derecho or sort of a straight line of storms is right in here. I wouldn't necessarily call it a derecho. It's probably just a stronger line of storms in through eastern Nebraska. So you can see the low pressure would be right here. You would have that front to the south, and then anywhere south and east of there has cape values that are between 500 and about 2,500 further to the south in parts of Kansas there. So that is going to wrap it up for today's video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.